From Acrisure Stadium in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, it is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer live on a Monday in January to recap the Ravens' devastating season-ending 26-24 loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. We are going to talk about what went wrong for the Ravens in this game. We're, of course, going to talk about Tyler Loop's missed 44-yard field goal attempt with the game on the line in the final seconds. We'll talk about what we heard and saw in the post-game press conferences, as well as the locker room, and we'll talk about where the Ravens go from here. All that and much, much more. But first, let's get a quick word from our sponsors.
For the fifth year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
Looking for the ultimate game day spot? Head to Guinness, Baltimore. We've got fresh pints, the biggest screen south of the stadium, and the perfect place to cheer on the home team. Game time is Guinness time.
All right, Jonas, we are here to recap the Ravens' season-ending loss in Week 18 in Pittsburgh. They fall to their division rival Steelers in a game that really had everything. I think if the Ravens had come out on the other side of this game with a win, I think we could say that was one of the more entertaining and enjoyable games, not just this season, but in the rivalry, in the history of this rivalry. But because the Ravens fell in this game in devastating fashion, it is going to be an absolutely bitter memory for a lot of Ravens fans in a season that has produced a lot of bad memories. The way that the Ravens went out in this game, a missed 44-yard field goal attempt by Tyler Loop in the waning seconds on the road here to lose the division, has got to be one of the worst possible moments you can remember.
Yeah, and there have been a lot of them in recent memory. The Ravens find new interesting ways every single year to lose high leverage games, high profile games, primetime games. I think if this is it for John Harbaugh, I think the embarrassment factor of some of these losses, of some of these collapses, will be an important consideration in that decision making. Obviously, we have much more time in this podcast to talk about what exactly is the next step with John Harbaugh and Steve Bisciotti and Lamar Jackson and this organization. But it's almost comical just to have been at so many of these games year after year and watch them unfold the way that they have. Obviously this was for a spot in the playoffs, but as so many guys said, like, this was basically a playoff game because you are playing for your lives. But you think back to last year with the terrible loss in Buffalo, where it is just decided by the slimmest of margins, a ball bouncing off Mark Andrews' hands, a catch that he makes 98 times out of 100. The year before, it is Zay Flowers fumbling at the goal line as he's looking for pay dirt when the Ravens were starting to make a comeback. You think back to 2020, you think back to 2019, that terrible loss to the Titans. It's, the ball ricocheting off Mark Andrews' hands again on an interception that leads to kind of a pivot point. You think of, Mark Ingram blasting a Titans pass rusher past Ronnie Stanley and into Lamar Jackson on a play that ends with a strip sack and another aborted Ravens drive and more Titans points, excuse me. So it is just, I don't know if it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I don't know if the Ravens believe that. I don't know if you hook them up to a lie detector test, whether they would testify to this feeling of the sky will eventually fall. But man, there were some, I think, eye-opening comments in the locker room afterward. And it's going to be tough to separate the nitty-gritty of what actually happened in this from what it means for the team going forward, for the coaching staff going forward, for the front office going forward. But you're right, this game had everything. And unfortunately for the Ravens, that also included the first miss under 50 yards for Tyler Loop this year, and just an absolutely inconsolable, rookie kind of thrown into the fires of his first real playoff type atmosphere.
Yeah, let's talk about that Tyler Loop miss before we get into the rest of the game and then the big picture, because it ultimately, this game did come down to the foot of the Ravens rookie kicker. And Jonas, I think back to podcasts we did after the draft, podcasts we did during training camp, podcasts we did perhaps at times during the seasons, where we said Tyler Loop looks great. He was a sixth round rookie. He had a tremendous college career. The Ravens coaching staff believes in him. Randy Brown believes in him. This team believes in him, and he looked phenomenal in the preseason. He had a pretty solid rookie season, but we kept saying we just don't know how he's going to perform when the lights are the brightest. We don't know, and we may have even used this specific example, how he's going to kick a field goal in January in Pittsburgh. And this is an incredibly tough situation for a rookie kicker to be thrust into, no matter how many months of regular season action he has gotten. This is essentially a playoff game. The ball is on his foot. And I give Tyler Loop a lot of credit for standing up to the media after the game, talking for about 7.5 minutes in a video that was posted on our social channel, Balt Banner Sports. And he faced the music. He talked about the fans embracing him. He talked about the city embracing him and how this is going to take him a lot of time to get over. Talked about how, he's going to lean on his family and his friends. He talked about how he had written a certain Bible passage in his notebook before the game. And after the game, he was sitting in his locker. Various teammates were coming up to him and, offering words of encouragement. And he was rereading that passage while sitting alone in his locker. When he was walking off the field, he was obviously very emotional, had his helmet kind of covering his face, and John Harbaugh put his arm around him as the two of them walked into the locker room. It was an incredibly emotional moment, and I think we can't say enough about what it takes to get up and speak in front of the media in that kind of instance. And frankly, the hatred that you see on social media, the vile stuff that you see on social media, I know that doesn't, show the true feelings of the vast, vast majority of Ravens fans. And I just hope that everybody can treat what is a young man having the worst day of his entire life, most likely, with a little bit of grace.
Yeah. This is not to compare the expectations of greatness for Tyler Loop to the greatness that we've seen from Lamar Jackson. But if you want to remember a Lamar stinker, go back to his first playoff game in Baltimore against a Chargers team that he'd beaten 2 weeks earlier. He just, couldn't complete a single pass for about a two-quarter stretch there. And lo and behold, he turns into one of the greatest players that I've ever seen, a almost certain Hall of Famer. And, I think Lamar has built his career on the back of adversity that he's faced in his personal life and professional career and everything. And, Tyler Loop, obviously the expectation and the hope is that he's going to have a long, long career in Baltimore, like his predecessor, Justin Tucker, who unfortunately was invoked in the wake of this crushing loss and bad miss, which, he told you after the game, he knew as soon as it hit his foot that he missed that one. But you just have to remember, this is a guy who a year ago was kicking in the relatively low profile, relatively unbright lights of Arizona. And now he is thrust into prime time in a game that probably 25, 30 million people were watching. I don't know if he's aware of that in a situation like that, but, I'm sure the mistakes that he had in that fourth quarter, kicking the ball out of bounds, dropping another one in the red zone for a touchback, had to be hanging on him mentally as he stepped up to get that one. I think if I were John Harbaugh, if I were Todd Monken, I would have taken a little bit more of a bold approach before that kick. It was 44 yards. It's makeable for him. As I just said, he had missed below 50, but you have 14 seconds on the clock. You have a timeout. You can access any part of the field with the run, the pass, scramble. All you have to do is just not turn it over, not go backwards. And instead, they go backwards a little bit to center the ball. I asked John Harbaugh post game, what the decision-making process was behind that. And he just said, we wanted to give ourselves a little bit of margin for error in case there was something bad that happened with the snap. It's like, I guess, but when was the last time Nick Moore had a bad snap? When was the last time Jordan Stout had a bad hold, just an overall bad operation? I just think that when you consider how slim the margin for error is in a game like this, in an environment that's as tough to kick as Acrisure Stadium. I mean, like one of the many Herculean accomplishments of Justin Tucker was very rarely seen here because there's just so much stuff that makes this a very, very difficult place to kick in. Why not give yourself at least a chance to improve yourself? If you throw the ball incomplete, there's probably 7 seconds left on the clock. You still have time to center the ball. I just thought that they could have done a little bit more to give yourself a 36-yard kick from the left hash as opposed to a 44-yard kick from the middle.
Right. And truth be told, this game should not have come down to a decision as to whether you center the ball or you try another play down the field, as to whether a rookie kicker is going to make a 44-yarder or not. I mean, this game should not have come down to this. The season should not have come down to this. The Ravens took the lead twice within the final 8 minutes of the fourth quarter, and they relinquished that lead twice to a Steelers team that had a 42-year-old starting quarterback and was without its top wideout and had next to no weapons on offense. And to me, as this game was coming down to the wire, you saw Lamar Jackson, who has been battling injury all season, from the hamstring to the knee to the ankle to the toe to the back, came back in this game after being kneed in the back and had that contusion. First start back from the back injury after all that was said and written about him and his relationship with John Harbaugh and whether he wanted to be here and having to stand up there and defend himself in front of the media. He balled out in the final 2 possessions of this game. Zay Flowers, who has taken a lot of criticism this season for costly fumbles at critical moments, he balled out. He caught 2 touchdown passes in the final few minutes of this game. Isaiah Likely, who has had a nightmarish season, who has
even going back to last year with the toe just out of bounds in week 1 against Kansas City.
And of course, couldn't get the third foot down in the first matchup between these two teams in the end zone that could have resulted in the Ravens winning that game and perhaps winning the division. He makes a critical catch on 4th and 7 to set up the Ravens in field goal range. So they had all of these guys who were fighting for redemption and seemed to have redeemed themselves. And it felt like all of the magic that we had, the Lamar magic in particular, that had been missing all season, was finally recaptured in the final few minutes of this game. But it was too little too late because it took for them too long to get there. This offense took way too long to get going. They had just 10 points at halftime, and it wasn't until the fourth quarter that they really started to finally show things. And the defense let them down in critical back-to-back possessions, allowing the Steelers to score touchdowns in those 2 possessions. And that is the story of the season. The offense took too long to get going. That's why the Ravens started the season out slow. They started the season out 1-5 and had to claw their way all the way back. And the defense continually let this team down in critical moments. It happened against the Steelers, it happened against the Patriots, and it happened again tonight.
Yeah, I mean, this game was an epitome in so many ways of what has befallen the Ravens this season. But you look at some of the advanced stats for this offense. You know, Lamar Jackson, 0.33 EPA per play, which is all-pro MVP level. Obviously, only 27 plays, which I think, to me, touches on a bit of an issue that I had with the play calling and the approach in general. Like, I went up mid-game and counted just how many first-down runs the Ravens had. At one point, it was like 13 of the first 15 plays were called runs. And at a certain point, they started running into a wall, and yet they persisted, and they hurt themselves on second down, or they hurt themselves for second down, which hurt themselves for third down. And you saw when they finally decided to open up with play actions or just straight dropbacks on first down and put the ball in Lamar's hands, your 2-time MVP, things started to click a little bit more. I wonder if Todd Monken was lulled into a false sense of security with what the Ravens were able to do on that first down drive. If we hand the ball to Derrick Henry enough against this Steelers front, which again is a much different beast with Derek Harmon in the middle of that line than without.
And
Ravens didn't face them in week 14.
Right.
They did tonight. The splits for that Steelers defense with him on and off the field were really, really eye-opening. They become like a top 5 run defense with him, like a bottom 3rd run defense without him. And I just thought that 27 plays for Lamar Jackson all told was not enough. And, obviously some of that efficiency probably would have come down with the bigger sample size, but you look at their overall success rate for tonight, 34%. Anything under 35 is terrible. The Steelers, meanwhile, were at 45, which they were sacrificing explosiveness for just the ability to move the chains. And so often from that second quarter to early in the fourth quarter for the Ravens, they just were not able to do anything. They were not able to kind of stem the tide. That the one score that they had for an eternity after that opening touchdown was the Tyler Luke field goal after the turnover on downs by the Steelers in their own territory. It just felt like they waited too long to embrace the chaos that Lamar can kind of bring to games. But I think anyone pinning the blame on this on Todd Monken and on the offense, even the offensive line, which didn't have a great night tonight, I think is just missing the forest for the trees because, as you said, it was the defense that could not stop a Steelers offense that didn't have Darnell Washington as a run blocker or pass catcher over the middle, did not have DK Metcalf to threaten you vertically, didn't have much of a ground game in between the 20s. Certainly, the injuries loomed large in this one. The splits with and without Kyle Hamilton, which we'll get into, were pretty eye-opening. They lose Cheeto Awuzie for a little bit. Nate Wiggins goes down for a little bit.
Most notably, Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah. It's good teams still find a way. And the Ravens, again, for the umpteenth time in prime time, for the umpteenth time in a game that actually mattered, could not do it.
I think the offense isn't entirely blameless, though, because they entered the fourth quarter with just 10 points. And it took far too long for them to figure out a winning formula against the Steelers team. But the defense, to me, those back-to-back touchdown drives by the Steelers were inexcusable, even without Kyle Hamilton on the field. The first one was the Ravens take the lead on perhaps the most highlight-worthy play of Lamar Jackson's season on the touchdown to Zay Flowers. He escapes 2 rushers. Looks like he is dead to rights.
Has a first down if he wants to scramble for it. Says, F that. I see Zay Flowers with Patrick Queen matching him downfield. I'm going to take my chances with 4. And I don't know about you, Paul, but watching from the press box, it looked like the arc of that throw and also how Zay had to kind of zigzag on the way. I thought for sure he overshot him.
Yes, I thought so too.
It was a perfect basket catch.
It was an absolutely perfect throw for that touchdown. That was a truly remarkable play. I mean, that was what should have been a game-winning play. And then the Ravens defense allows the Steelers to go 8 plays, 60 yards in less than 5 minutes, come right down the field and score a touchdown to retake the lead. The most glaringly bad play in that drive was the 31-yard pass down to the Ravens' 5-yard line. Aaron Rodgers to Pat Freiermuth. Looked like it was thrown over the head of Ardarius Washington. Jonas, you noted that the Ravens dropped 8 players into coverage. They only had 3 players rushing the quarterback, and they still allow a huge completion right over the middle. And then the Steelers still need to take 2 timeouts when they have first and goal before they're finally able to punch it in. That was inexcusable. The Ravens get the ball back. Lamar Jackson pulls another rabbit out of his hat, and they score in just 3 plays. Zay Flowers somehow gets behind the Steelers' defense. I was actually in the tunnel downstairs watching this on the screen because I was waiting for the Ravens to come towards the locker room. And the Ravens take a 24-20 lead on a 64-yard completion to Zay Flowers.
No way they can give that up again, right, Paul?
No way. There's just no way, especially considering the Steelers are at this point, I believe, out of timeouts.
Yep. They got the ball at 2:20 with no timeouts.
Yep.
If we want to play annoying second guessers, what's it called? Second guessing.
Monday morning quarterbacking.
We're second guessing.
It's early Monday morning, so it's 1:44.
If you're Zay Flowers, you take that into the first touchdown 9 times or every day of the week and twice on Sunday, right?
Yes.
You don't think about dropping to a knee at the 1 yard line.
No, because ultimately, if you drop to a knee at the 1 yard line, they still have the 2-minute warning. I mean, they're going to get the ball back no matter what.
And no guarantee that you're going to punch that in.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have we seen the Ravens struggle at the goal line this season? I think you absolutely take that in, and you just have to count on the defense not doing it again. And then the Steelers get the ball, 16-yard completion, 8-yard completion, 15-yard completion, back incompletions, 26-yard touchdown, one-on-one on the outside. It's Calvin Austin against Chidobe Awuzie. It's a double move. Chidobe Awuzie is playing very soft coverage. Chidobe Awuzie has no shot. He trips on his feet. Calvin Austin is wide open for a touchdown to take the lead. It seemed like there could have been better coverage, but Chidobe Awuzie just fell down when the game was on the line.
Yeah, and there was a bitter, poetic irony that it happened on 3rd and long. Like, of course it happened on 3rd and long.
Yeah.
It was not 3rd and short. It was not 4th and 5. It was 3rd and long.
It was also bitter, poetic irony that the cornerback position, that the guy that the Ravens signed to be their back. I mean, at this point, they signed Chidobe Awuzie before they signed Jair Alexander, but they were all, as the second they signed Jair Alexander, they were hoping that he was going to take that cornerback spot and run with it. And he ends up being the backup plan because the Jair Alexander experiment fails miserably, and he holds on to that cornerback spot. But it's a position that how many times has Eric DeCosta sunk resource after resource after resource into? And ultimately, it is a spot that dooms them.
Ravens start the season with us playing up the hype of this maybe being the best secondary in the NFL. Then we watch it exposed by the Keon Coleman-led Bills, which I think in hindsight was a pretty bad omen for what this year would be for the secondary. There was some moments of joy for this secondary when they were playing the J.J. McCarthy's and Tua Tagovailoas of the world. But overall, you sink as many resources into the secondary as the Ravens did, it cannot fall apart at the drop of a Kyle Hamilton's hat. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Against this group of weapons.
You bring in Chuck Pagano, you make changes to the secondary coaching room. You expected more from this defense. And John Harbaugh, I think, seemed to acknowledge that explosives were the problem. Like he rarely identifies season-long trends unless they're just abundantly clear. And he said the big plays hurt us tonight, just like they've hurt us all year. And it was surprising that it was Cheeto who was burned, because he has been the Ravens' most impressive cornerback, their most reliable cornerback. You wonder how close he was to full strength after getting a little bit knocked around in that second half. But I think this is probably the best time to just talk about the Zach Orr of it all, the John Harbaugh of it all.
Yeah.
I asked Roquan Smith the last question at his presser after the game, like, Roquan, you came here in 2022. You've been on some incredible Ravens teams. You have 2 playoff wins to show for it. Like, there's a lot of fan discontent with this coaching staff right now. What do you make of the state of things? And he gave probably the longest answer that I can remember him giving as a Raven, in a locker room setting, in a press conference setting. He basically said, like, he didn't blame the coaching in an explicit way. He said that so often the Ravens were in the right call. The Ravens were in the right coverage, the right defense to combat whatever the offense had set up. But there was just like this mental block that kept the execution lacking or kept the effort lackadaisical. And this is just me speaking here. But when I hear that, and when I see just the kind of regression of this team since 2023, which, is going to be a mountaintop year for a lot of franchises around the NFL, it's hard to reach those heights of 2023 again so quickly and so easily. But to me, if I'm reading between the lines there and I'm Steve Bisciotti, I could say that means that the coaching is no longer resonating, that the messaging is falling on deaf ears for whatever reason, that you have coaches who know the game but don't know how to communicate it, who don't know how to connect with their players, who don't know how to put these guys in the best positions, not just on first and second down, but on third down as well. I think probably if there is going to be a fall guy for John Harbaugh that keeps him back and that gives him another year in Baltimore, it probably will be Zach Orr. I know fans were very, very unhappy about like the gross passing stats from last year when the Ravens finished like bottom 5 in the NFL, but that still ended up being, I think, by DVOA, like a top 10 defense. It was not as bad a defense as people made it out to be. But the expectations from us, the expectations from the talking heads around the NFL was that this was a defense that was a good bet to be a top 5 defense because of everything that it had. Because sure, there weren't primetime players at key spots like edge rusher. Obviously some questions about the safety play once our Darius Washington got hurt. But there was just so much depth there that this defense, even losing Nnamdi Madubuike, should not have come into tonight's game with a number 16 overall defense. The pass rush should not have looked this feckless against Aaron Rodgers when you've built your team to be the tougher team, the team that outlasts the other team in these primetime games. And, I just think that if this is it for Zach Orr after 2 years, again, this is the kind of game, this is the kind of secondary pass defense performance that will have been his undoing. It was exactly the problem at the start of last year, and it's exactly the way the Ravens end this year with so many of these primetime just implosions from very talented players.
And I think Ravens fans only need to look west to Seattle to see Mike Macdonald not coordinating, but head coaching that Seattle defense, which has been terrific. They're headed to the playoffs. They're division champs. And doing it all with a rookie safety, Nick Ebenwari, that was taken after Malachi Starks. Appears Mike Macdonald has found his version of Kyle Hamilton, and he took him in a round after the Ravens took Malachi Starks with their first-round pick. And I do think it's
a little bit apples to oranges, just to cut you off, because Ebenwari is basically the box safety, cut the slot corner.
Yeah, they're different positions.
Kyle Hamilton, is such a star, and Malachi is obviously the more of the deep safety guy,
yes,
who, when he's been tested over the middle, basically until tonight with the Freiermuth completion on 3rd and long, I thought had done a very good job, all things considered, as a rookie.
Ebenwari has the ability, because he plays closer to the line of scrimmage, to impact the game in different ways, a la Kyle Hamilton. Like, you see him more often, and Malachi Starks is in the unfortunate position that he is doing his best when you don't pay attention to him. Right. And he did progress as the season went along. It just is frustrating, I think, for a lot of Ravens fans to see Mike Macdonald and that side have success. I do.
And that Seahawks defense, just like the Ravens defense in 2023, has not been injury proof. Like, they've watched key starters go in and out of the lineup. Like, Devin Witherspoon has missed time. Ebenwari took a couple of weeks to get ramped up. They've dealt with injuries at every level of that defense, but all along they have remained elite. Meanwhile, you look at the splits with Kyle Hamilton tonight. For the first half of this game, essentially half plus, Kyle Hamilton on the field, this is from Next Gen Stats, 3.9 yards per play, 37% success rate, minus 0.27 EPA per play. All of that will get you a win like 99.9 times out of 100. When Kyle Hamilton gets hurt, head-to-head collision with Loic Gilman, leaves the field 1 minute into the third quarter. After that, 35 plays, 6.9 yards per play, 60% success rate, 0.44 EPA per play. You can't have someone like Kyle Hamilton be that much of a load-bearing piece.
No.
And consider this defense to be as airtight as it needs to be.
I mean, Kyle Hamilton is a defensive MVP. I mean, he is a perennial defensive player of the year candidate. So I think we need to point that out. Also, to play devil's advocate, I mean, Zach Orr did lose Nnamdi Madubuike 2 weeks into the season. I mean, he lost a $100 million defensive tackle who was supposed to rush the passer and stop the run, and they never replaced him. I mean, the Ravens never found a good solution to replacing Nnamdi Madubuike. It's not like Eric DeCosta went out and got a star defensive tackle. He got Draymond Jones, who's an edge rusher, but continually the Ravens pass rush struggled this season. Tavius Robinson had a sack tonight. Travis Jones had a sack tonight. That was it. I mean, the Ravens ultimately,
which is pretty good against Aaron Rodgers, who gets the ball out as quickly as he did.
That's true.
But I think even Aaron Rodgers understood this Ravens pass rush is so bad. I do not need to get the ball out in 2.5 seconds.
Yeah.
I can take my time, my sweet old time, waiting for guys to get open, because with enough time, there will be air in this zone defense, or someone will mess up in man coverage.
And is that a Zach Orr problem, or is that an Eric DeCosta problem? Because they're relying on Kyle Van Noy, who is closer to retirement. They're relying on Draymond Jones, who they got for a day 3 pick. Like they're not exactly relying on superstar level players, because Eric DeCosta has consistently prioritized secondary over pass rush, and it hurt them all season. Also, to the Mike Macdonald point, it feels I was the one who compared Mike Macdonald to Zach Orr, so I feel unfair doing this, but it is unfair because Mike Macdonald was never going to stay. Mike Macdonald got a head coaching offer and he took it. The Ravens were never going to keep him on as defensive coordinator, and you're never going to fire John Harbaugh just after he takes your team to the AFC Championship game. You're just never going to fire your head coach. Point me to the team that has fired a head coach after he has taken his team to the conference championship game. Has it ever happened?
In the NFL, no. Didn't like Michigan fire Steve Fisher like the year that they basketball, like year after they won the title or the year before they won the title? So something weird that happened in Michigan basketball.
But I mean, you're just not going to do that.
Yeah.
So Mike Macdonald was never going to become the head coach of this team in 2024. So it just feels a little bit unfair. And Zach Orr had huge shoes to fill in following Mike Macdonald. And also the team between 23 and 24 lost so much talent at that time. Now, Eric DeCosta drafted a bunch of guys and brought in a bunch of new guys to try to replace that talent. But Zach Orr was dealing with certainly a different defense.
Yeah. And just to put an exclamation point on the pass rush picture, again, this is not including tonight's details, tonight's stats from Sports Info Solutions from week 3. So the first game after Madubuike is officially announced out for the year and maybe for the rest of his career. He was at the game tonight. Didn't see him in the locker room. I guess we're hoping for more clarity from John Harbaugh, Eric DeCosta at the end of season presser, which could be this week, could be a couple of weeks away. Who knows? But from week 3 to week 17, the Ravens ranked 29th in the NFL in sack rate, 27th in pressure rate, and 29th in pressure rate with 4 or fewer pass rushers. I know that Ravens fans are hurting over how tonight ended, but with a pass rush like that and with a secondary like the one that we saw at the end of tonight's game, it becomes very, very hard to imagine this team doing anything in the playoffs against the better quarterbacks, the better wide receiver trios, the better offense. Not Steelers have a good offensive line, but just the better offenses in general with a pass rush that feckless. I mean, again, we saw it play out at the end of the first half. A team is in a no need to run situation. And what does it do? It passes all over the Ravens.
Yeah.
They only didn't score against the Ravens at the end of that first half because Kyle Van Noy and Louis Gilman did a great job of staying locked in on that misdirection pitch play. But at no point, I think, in that drive, till maybe the end, did the Steelers run a running play. The Ravens, thus, should have known, had to know that every single play coming their way was going to be a drop back. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter a lick.
Aaron Rodgers completed 31 of 47 passes in this game for 294 yards and a touchdown. Lamar Jackson, on the other hand, completed 11 for 18. Those 11 completions included 3 touchdowns.
Aaron Rodgers' 2 biggest games in terms of total yardage, both against the Ravens.
This season. That's crazy. You were in Lamar Jackson's press conference. You were in John Harbaugh's press conference. Obviously, we talked about the coordinators and their job statuses, but fans are naturally going to turn to John Harbaugh's job status. What did Harbaugh have to say after this game, and what did Lamar have to say when asked about the possibility or the likelihood that this team will retain John Harbaugh as their head coach?
Yeah, John kept things pretty short and sweet with his answers. Didn't talk for long. Would have liked to have more time to ask him some questions, but I believe the last question that he got was basically, does he want to come back next year. And he said, yeah, I want another shot with my guys, or something to that effect. Obviously, Adam Schefter earlier today speculated that there's a little bit more uncertainty there with John Harbaugh than people might believe. Certainly, John, could be traded. I think that would be a very, very delicate process, not only finding the right compensation, but also going to a team that would be able to offer him the kind of money that I think he's making in Baltimore. It would have to be a trade that satisfies both parties, and that's a lot of asks. I also wonder, John, like a lot of coaches, is concerned with his legacy. And are you going to find another spot that in the next 2 to 3 years will put you closer to a Super Bowl, a potential second Lombardi trophy, which in his case might be good enough to stamp his Hall of Fame credentials? Is there a better shot of that in Baltimore or elsewhere? I think he probably sees the writing on the wall as far as, even if I don't like it here for whatever reasons might exist. Obviously he was asked about his relationship with Lamar Jackson. He's been a big Lamar booster, whether everything is hunky-dory, inside those halls at one winning drive, we may never know. But I think it would probably make most sense for John to come back. Lamar was also asked about not only one, his desire to come back to Baltimore next year, but two, just his desire to see John Harbaugh come back with him. And he'd already kind of answered a version of that second question on Thursday when he said that there was no truth to the Baltimore Sun report, that he basically had it with John Harbaugh. And, even as we, see John Harbaugh walk off the podium tonight, he gives a loving hug to Lamar Jackson as he heads back to the locker room. So there was not a lot of there's not a lot of coldness to that interaction, I thought. But Lamar, whether it was the PR savvy thing to do, the emotionally correct thing to do, I don't know. But to both questions, he basically said, it's way too soon after a loss this devastating to be answering a question of that magnitude. I don't have an answer for you. And obviously, nature abhors a vacuum. When you have an answer that is a non-answer, people will read whatever the hell they want into it. You fill that negative space with all kinds of your own projections, your own hopes and fears about what might come. I just think that if I'm John Harbaugh and if I'm, waking up after this short jet flight back home to Baltimore and I'm seeing texts from friends, or if I'm, on Google News looking at Lamar Jackson headlines that says Lamar leaves future with John Harbaugh unclear after playoff loss, I'm probably feeling a pit in my stomach. Like, I don't know. I want Lamar to be emotionally honest with us, but I think it probably would have made a lot of people sleep easier tonight if he'd said, even if it was a little bit of dishonesty there, that
hell yeah, I want him back.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's all it would have taken to quell that. It would be very easy. I don't know if we'll hear from him at locker room cleanout as well. Considering we just heard from Lamar Jackson, and I'm wondering if
we rarely see the more high profile players at the locker room cleanout. So, we got a chance to talk to some of the guys: Ronnie Stanley, Mark Andrews, Derrick Henry. I think Mark gave the most ardent, recommendation that John Harbaugh come back. Derrick Henry and Ronnie Stanley both defaulted to the, I love my coach, I love my organization, but it's not my call, which I think is probably the most politically correct thing to do. But we'll see. I mean, there's obviously there was a wave of firings tonight. Black Monday is called Black Monday for a reason. I feel like the Ravens will probably take their time in deciding what to do exactly, because you want to meet with Steve Bisciotti, you want to consider all the stakeholders here involved, but this is new ground for the Ravens and John Harbaugh, certainly.
All right, we are going to take a look at some odds and ends and put a bow on this thing on the other side of another quick break.
For the fifth year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
Looking for the ultimate game day spot? Head to Guinness, Baltimore. We've got fresh pints, the biggest screen south of the stadium, and the perfect place to cheer on the home team. Game time is Guinness time.
All right, Jonas. It feels inconsequential now, but we have a few items of news to talk about that happened this week that we didn't get to talk about. And one of those is that John Jenkins signed a 1-year extension for $2 million on Friday. The veteran, 36 years old, came in to help fill the void of Nnamdi Madubuike this year. And the Ravens have seen enough to extend him. They also signed Nick Moore, long snapper, who talked after this game and supported his kicker, actually stood off to the left of Tyler Loop in support of Tyler Loop during his media availability today. He signed a 4-year extension on Friday. Jonas, for cap purposes, is there a benefit to getting these deals done now as opposed to waiting until free agency opens?
Yeah. I mean, the good thing with the Travis Jones deal, the Mark Andrews deal, even if you might not be a fan of it, and I don't know if the last 5 weeks or so of Mark Andrews' season have been vindicating for that front office. I don't know if that deal is going to age especially well, but by getting these deals done, even the small ones done before the cap year ends, before the season ends, you do help yourself a little bit just by defraying some of these costs. Obviously, the Ravens were not hard up for cap space this year, which was a little bit of a surprise. I think they had about $10 million at the end of the year, which they'll roll over into next year. They have a good amount of cap space for the 2026 offseason, $31.4 million at last check, according to Over the Cap. That's an inexact measurement considering just everything that they have to get done. They have to handle the Lamar situation. They have to re-sign Tyler Linderbaum. They have to make space for in-season signings. They have to make space for their draft class. They have to decide which of these mid-level contributors they really want back. It's going to be a busy offseason in Baltimore, and with this loss tonight, we know one key piece that's set into place, which is they're going to be picking number 14 in the 2026 draft, which I think puts them in good range to get a potential difference maker along the edge. The last time they picked number 14 overall, they got a pretty good fella named Kyle Hamilton,
Who wears number 14?
So, we'll be digging into draft stuff in the next couple months, but depending on how this offseason goes, I still think just, you look around the league and how many of these would-be contenders are either extremely hard up for cap space, like right now, or just don't have the kind of talent that the Ravens do have on this roster. I mean, there's going to be all kinds of discussions that we'll have about Marlon Humphrey's situation with his cap hit next year being pretty aggressive, and him having maybe the worst year of his career in Baltimore. Roquan Smith, I think, is probably a safer bet to come back, but he's got a big cap hit for next year as we kind of reach the end of that 5-year, $100 million deal that he signed not long after he got to Baltimore. But there's a lot of decisions that the Ravens have to make. They're going to have 11 draft picks. They're probably going to do the quintessentially Ravens thing and just take care of their own. And maybe there's room for one splashy DeAndre Hopkins type signing. But as we saw this year, the big bold-faced names that we all kind of lost our shit collectively about didn't end up doing a whole lot for this Ravens team. Jair Alexander barely played for the 10 weeks that he was on this team before getting traded to the Eagles. And then he effectively shut it down for the rest of the season once he got to Philly. DeAndre Hopkins, maybe in another offense is a little bit more effective, but just was not targeted as a kind of contested catch guy. Depending on PFF or fantasy points data, he was either very good at separating from coverage or very, very bad at it. Just one of those things where analytics and quantitative data can tell you just about whatever you want to from a certain player. But the Ravens have to be better in the trenches. I think they have to be able to run the ball and get that force multiplier effect from Derrick Henry, especially if we see Lamar Jackson start to age out of his athletic prime. They need a pass rusher desperately. I don't know if you can assume Mike Green will be anything more than a really nice number 2 based on everything that we saw from him. I mean, it was kind of surprising just how many snaps Kyle Van Noy was the pick, along with Draymond Jones, to be the edge rusher on these crucial 3rd and long situations. So I know it feels like a sky's falling situation, and maybe the sky will start to fall if certain things happen with Lamar Jackson or John Harbaugh or whomever. But it's a tough thing to tell you guys that the Ravens aren't in as bad place as it might seem, because there has been no consolation for year after year of playoff heartbreak and now week 18 heartbreak as well.
Yeah. This team absolutely needs to invest in the trenches on both sides of the ball. It has been far too long since they've taken an offensive lineman in the first round. Tyler Linderbaum, I believe, was the last one. It's been far too long since they've taken an edge rusher or a defensive lineman in the first round. I believe Odafe Owe was the last one, both taken in the same year. And now one of them is...
Odafe and Bateman were the same year.
Odafe and Bateman, sorry. One of them is no longer on the team, and the other one is set to become a free agent. Just this season as a whole, I think anytime you have a season where Lamar Jackson is your quarterback in the midst of his prime and you come up short, has to be viewed as a missed opportunity. And this season got off on the wrong foot in Buffalo, and it just felt like no matter how much they tried to fight to punch upwards and to get themselves back into this, they were not able to do so. They missed the playoffs for the first time since 2021. They finished with the losing season for the first time since 2021. And if, they had won this game and gotten into the playoffs, nobody cares how you get there. They could have they have the talent. They could have gone on a run, but they lost this game tonight, and they lost too many games over the course of the regular season.
Turns out starting 1-5 is not the best way to help your playoff hopes.
No, I mean,
in the long run.
The Steelers are going to play the Texans at home next weekend. The Ravens would have had a real shot to beat the Texans at home.
They, according to the somewhat unreliable, maybe a little bit reliable odds makers that spam our inboxes, the Ravens would have been 2.5-point favorites over the Texans, which seems crazy to me, but I guess Vegas knows best.
Playing in an AFC
where
playoff
everyone was
slate
gettable
without Patrick Mahomes,
a possibly injured Josh Allen,
with a Bills team that you took down to the wire in week 1 and you should have beaten in Buffalo. It was all there for him. I mean, it not in the same way that it was in 2023 when they were in the 1 seed. But it certainly could have been the beginning of a run. And, if Tyler Luke makes the field goal today, it could have been a complete, or if one little thing goes differently, it could have been a completely different story.
Yeah. This is probably as good a sign as any for us to sign off pretty soon. But for whatever reason, my mind, when thinking about this Ravens season in the big picture, went back to a scene from The Simpsons, the classic episode, Lisa the Vegetarian, where a rotisserie pig gets shot through the air.
Yes.
And Homer is just rationalizing that this pig that is flying increasingly out of shape, increasingly out of sight line, into an increasingly less and less desirable state, is still good. He says, it's just a little dirty. It's still good. It's still good. The pig floats down a stream. It's just a little slimy. It's still good. It's still good. The pig reaches a dam at the end of the stream and plugs the drain hole. And then it's launched out of the hole into the air. It's just a little airborne. It's still good. It's still good. Bart says, it's gone. Homer says, I know. I felt like the way that we've talked about this team all year is trying to talk ourselves into what this team could be based on what we saw from this defense at the end of last year, based on the incredible heights that the offense had last year, based on the progress that we saw from special teams this year. And it just never came together. It was never good. And now it's gone. And we should have known all along.
Yeah. My favorite part of that is actually right after the pig flies through the air, you see Mr. Burns and Smithers. And Mr. Burns says, I'll donate all my money to charity when pigs fly. And they see the flying pig. And Smithers goes, so are you going to donate that to charity? Mr. Burns just goes, I don't think I will.
Yeah. No, I'd still prefer not.
That's one of my favorite episodes.
Man.
We're loopy.
The Ravens will make the Super Bowl when pigs fly. When
pigs fly. Loopy, pun intended. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for tuning in all season long. We really appreciate you following along all season. We will have plenty more coverage throughout the off season, throughout the draft process, into the training camp and all that good stuff. And we have so much more coverage on thebanner.com.
Shout out to the Banner.
Where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months.
Maybe the last time we hear that drop.
Don't think that far ahead, Jonas. We'll have another podcast for you. I think maybe later this week if we learn some more stuff about what went wrong, what the Ravens have to say about their season as a whole. Like, rate, review, subscribe. Follow Jonas at Jonas_Shaffer on X. Gian Hahn, Kyle Goon. So much more coverage. Childs Walker. He'll have his 5 things. So much more coverage for you as well. Write us a 5-star review, and I'll read it out here on the show. Cool Hand Luke 22 wrote us a 5-star review that I probably can't read, but otherwise, you DM me, Cool Hand Luke 22. But write us a 5-star review, and I'll read it out here most of the time.